I'm done. Excuse me.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Disney Antiquities and Collectibles. As usual, Vince G with my co-host, the amazing, incredible.
Welcome, everyone. We've got a good show for you today.
Matt
Double the enjoyment.
Matt McKim, everybody. Anyways, yeah. You know what's funny is with this one, with getting to talk about Harriet Burns. This one is it's more sentimental because it's Mother's Day, because
Yes.
I don't have my mother, Pam and Haley don't have their mother, grandmother, and you've still got your mom. So it's very sentimental to me. I mean, looking at all Harriet was such a fun lady. All the stories I've ever heard. I was never lucky enough to meet her, but the stories I've heard about her are incredible, and you guys all know her firsthand. So I'm so looking forward to talking to these two ladies.
Yes. Very special lady. Very special lady. She was one of my 5 favorite Imagineers growing up.
Really? I didn't know this, and I understand that she was Walt's favorite Imagineer. That was known, I guess. She was Walt's favorite Imagineer.
There's many a stories, yes, and if you knew Harriet, you would understand that.
Yeah. Well, without further ado, I'm going to bring on Pam Burns Clair and her granddaughter Haley Clair. Ladies, welcome to our show.
And welcome. This is my daughter.
I think he was referring to Harriet's granddaughter. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
You're both too young for that. You both look too young for that.
Oh, absolutely. So, I want to start off right away. Pam, you and your mom and dad moved from Texas to California. You're very young. You're little.
18 months.
Mom, 18 months. So, you're
I don't remember the move.
Yeah, I was going to say you were remembering the move, but as you were growing up, and we got to talk to Chris about this, Chris Crump, who you know quite well. Growing up, did you get to talk to the other kids in school, like show and tell, my mom works for Disney? Did you get to do that?
Well, it wasn't such a thing then. Disneyland opened when I was 3, and I didn't brag about it because I was too little to really grasp that what my mom did, and I didn't realize she was the first female. They didn't even call them Imagineers at first. She worked in the model shop, and my dad and I drove to the studio and dropped her off and picked her up. So I was too caught up in my own little life and learning how to spell and make friends and ride my bike and all that to be too preoccupied with what my mom was doing as a groundbreaking female pioneer. It wasn't until I was about 10 or 12 that it started to, we'd go to Disneyland and she'd point out all the things that she had done, and we'd take relatives every year and we got in for free back then. Now we don't.
Now we sure don't.
But when we went with her, it was free, and we would show off her projects to the relatives. And it wasn't really until the audio animatronics came about that it was clearly groundbreaking in everyone's eyes. And that she was the Tiki Mom and did the Tiki Birds and Lincoln and the Small World dolls and that kind of thing. So I didn't really grasp how big her career was going to be until I was a teenager.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. She did so much. You look at it's like layers and layers of things that she did. What would you define her career as? What would you say that was most rewarding to her? What did she love the most about what she did?
Well, she would say she loved it all. But I think of the attractions that she worked on, the Pirates, Tiki Birds, and Small World were big favorites. But I think the best part of her career was her relationship with Walt and the guys at the shop. She had quite a camaraderie with the guys from the get-go. They were very skeptical, as you may have learned or read, about a female coming into their scene. It's kind of like a locker room with the locker room talk and jibe and jesting and all that. And she fit right in, even though she was dressed so feminine with her heels and scarves and you know, her bouffant hair and French twist at first, and then it became this bubble that she ratted up every night. And anyway, she was very groomed, like she worked as a designer at a department store, but she was very boisterous with the guys.
I think it's actually that part of her was the most fun to discover. Really not until after she died, for me at least, because she mastered the compartmentalization.
Really?
She was master and was a completely different person with us than she was with work and her colleagues and all the guys at the shop. And so after she passed away, we started getting all these stories from people, and we would find some of her journals or whatever. And we were like, oh my God, Grandma has like the dirtiest sense of humor. She swears. And she was one of the guys in the shop. But at the same time, she was dressed in designer skirt suits, high heels, pearls, her scarf was sort of her signature. So we have Harriet with us today, and she's wearing one of her signature scarves.
It's a John Hench.
Yes.
But yeah, she was like kind of these two different people. And it's such an interesting kind of dichotomy, like I said before, and it's just such a fun trip to hear about that side, and I really wish I could have known that side of her a little bit more.
We were in Northern Cal raising our kids, and she was in LA, and when after my dad passed away, you know, she was in Santa Barbara, and so she would come up for a visit a couple times a year. We would go down and we would practice grandma manners with the girls to get ready for the visit, so they wouldn't have their elbows on the table or you know, have stuff on their face or crumbs on the table or anything like that. It was very proper. And then they found out after she passed away pretty much how raunchy she could be, but she behaved very properly with them. She liked to play with them, and there was a magical side, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
To her.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you know, the funny thing is that even my dad, and my dad was pretty proper and such, always wore a tie until, I don't know, the last few years. He would come in with the coat, but not the tie. But my dad was surprised to find out there was another side to your mom also, because she never shared any of her dirty jokes with my dad.
Oh, interesting.
Or me either. So I had no clue until later finding out.
And maybe not all of the viewers know that your dad also worked as an Imagineer, right?
Yes.
And that you worked there also.
Yeah.
Yes.
As well later.
And I didn't start until after your mom had retired, and my dad included. So she retired in 1986. My dad retired in January of 87. And then I started in December of 87.
Right.
So I unfortunately never worked. And I started in the model shop too, is where I started. But I never worked with her, as I never worked with my dad either.
You just missed each other. You were
just missed each other.
But
I grew up with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. So you were talking about,
I like
she
the
was
comment.
always so well put together, but I thought it was interesting rereading the book that she would put a pair of slacks in a bag to bring into work
early on because she was climbing ladders.
Right. So if she was going to be above, then she would put on the slacks, but otherwise she always had her dress, as you said, Haley, her pearls, the scarf and everything well put together. You know,
and these were her earrings. They were clip-on earrings, and I had them made into pierced earrings. So these were her opal earrings that I had
very sweet.
So that I could keep the tradition going.
Yes, and perfect.
Never had her ears pierced. That wasn't a thing for her, and she always had these side-ups. I thought they were painful clip-on earrings, but I took a couple of her clip-on earrings and had them made into earrings I could wear.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
Mother's Day, you know, so I had to.
You know, I was going to ask you, lady, do you guys remember her telling the story of first meeting Walt? Do you guys, are you privy to that story? Does she know it?
She didn't share it. So we're just guessing as to when she first met. Well, we know it was early on in her model shop days, and we know the story about the restroom.
Yeah.
You want to tell that?
Yeah, when she first started, I know that she really revered and respected Walt and loved working with him. And she always talked about, he would come back when they first started in the model shop before they moved Imagineering over to Glendale. She kind of talks about how it was just this little like back shed. It sounds like it was like a shipping container that they turned into a shop or something, is the way that they describe it. But Walt loved to come back and visit them there. She thinks it was sort of an escape for him, away from the studio and the corporate side of things and all things and the fundraising and whatever else he had to do. And he would come and play and just do lots of fun little things. In the shop with them. He was very notorious for wanting to get his hands on things because apparently he was a very talented miniature and model maker himself. Yes. But he was also notorious for breaking everything. But she loved working with him. The bathroom story Mom was referring to was when Grandma first started working at the shop, when they had the shed on the back lot. There was no ladies' restroom.
Oh.
And so either she had to hike a mile away to go find a ladies' room, or have one of the guys come and watch the door, and she would have to use the men's. And this got around to Walt. And so and Walt found out that this was an issue, and
the men had to watch the door for her.
I already said that.
I didn't hear
it. And so Walt had a ladies' room built for her on the Burbank studio lot. And I think he even asked her favorite color, and she said it was lavender. So he built her a lavender bathroom, and they were going to have a ribbon cutting ceremony and everything. But by the time the bathroom was finished, maybe, I don't know, I think the way she told it was like a week or two before the bathroom was done and ready to be used. They moved them all to Glendale, and she never got to use it.
I've never heard that story. But I have to interject, and you can tell the story. But your mom told me a story about your Toluca Lake home, and after you had moved in, so it was a 60s home or 50s home?
It was a 50s home that we moved in about 1960. I was 7 when we moved in.
Okay, but you remember the push button toilet?
Yes. They were very into modernizing everything. I mean, it wasn't push button at first. Everything was.
Oh, okay.
So we remodeled it. They remodeled it for 7 years. It was a fixer-upper.
So they put in the electric push button over the toilet then?
Yeah.
Well, she was telling me the funny story that the electrician had crossed wires, and that when you flushed the toilet, the doorbell rang, and when you rang the doorbell, the toilet flushed. And it was really embarrassing when you were sitting on the toilet.
But that does sound like one of the stories she would tell.
Oh, I thought that was brilliant.
You had to walk outside and flush the doorbell
to flush the toilet. Unless the mailman came up to deliver something, and then he did it for you.
That's a new one for me. I'm gonna have to pocket that.
The Fuller Brush Man must have had some fun.
Oh, but I love that story that your mom told.
Yeah, there was some quirky things about our house and the whole remodeling process. They took out every wall one by one.
Wow.
And you may have heard that they gold leafed the dining room ceiling.
Yes.
And they used panels of glass, and my mom carefully put the gold leaf little panels on and glued them down, and then my dad bolted them to the ceiling. And we got to visit the house recently by accident. Well, like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And the woman who lived there graciously invited us in when she heard the story of
It was actually pretty funny. It was the morning time, and Mom just wanted to drive by the house and show us this was the house I grew up in.
Because they never had seen it. The girls were with me.
Yeah. And we're kind of just standing outside trying not to be creepers and admiring, And then she comes out in her bathrobe and her bunny slippers to collect the newspaper in the driveway. And we were like, hi. And Mom was, a little bit teary, and she goes, I grew up here, and she goes, oh, well, come on in. We were like, okay.
So she showed us around. It was very sweet of her, and the gold leaf ceiling is still there, and she kind of had it decorated in the same kind of imaginative multi-period style, multi-ethnic.
Yes.
Or so it felt like they kept the spirit alive. She kept the spirit alive.
So was there a skeleton over the TV still?
when I grew up, but they didn't keep that. That didn't go with the house.
Everybody needs that story now.
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead
So
and tell
there
the
was a
story.
skeleton over our TV in the den. And the story of that is pretty funny because it involves Herbie Ryman, another very well-known Imagineer that my mom worked with. And my mom wanted a skeleton for live drawing. You know, that was when they were working on the Pirates and Small World, especially the Pirates. You know, she wanted to have the figures
to model
after, just like life drawing artists would.
Yes.
And they found a skeleton, a real skeleton, a human skeleton at a garage sale. In those days, you could get a skeleton from a garage sale and you didn't ask too many questions, I guess, whose grandpa it was. So they went, she and my dad met at lunch hour and picked up this skeleton from the garage sale and put it in the back seat of their car. And then they went to, what's the Mexican restaurant that they all went to for lunch? Matt, did you
yes.
know what that was?
Over by the equestrian center. I can't think of it. Yes.
Yeah, they went there for lunch and the skeleton was in the back seat and they got out of the car and Herbie Ryman pulled up right next to them in the parking lot. And so my dad was introduced to Herbie Ryman and they introduced Herbie to the skeleton in the back seat that they had just picked up from the garage.
And from that, my grandpa earned the nickname Bonesy.
Yes. I never heard that either until I read the book.
And the skeleton got hung from the ceiling above the TV in the sort of family room, which we referred to as the den. And it's freaked out my grandmothers and any housekeepers that we had. They didn't really appreciate that there was a skeleton in there, but I enjoyed showing it to my friends.
Oh, it was Halloween every day, right?
That's right. And then another story about Halloween is that they were casting the hands for the pirates. No, it's actually for
cavemen.
Cavemen.
It was cavemen for, I think it was the World's Fair. We figured out.
Yes.
They were doing the what was that show that
well, I think it was the
Ford Pavilion.
Yes.
Carousel of Progress. But anyway, her hands were cast.
It wasn't the Carousel of Progress.
Okay, never mind.
One of those.
And they cast her hands and the casting got screwed up. And so she got to take these rubber hands home, one of which has a wrinkle in it. We still have them. And so I got to be a witch that year for Halloween. I was in the 4th grade and I held the hands below my kind of like bathrobe that I was wearing as a witch costume. And the hands jiggled. They were like rubber and they jiggled. So that was a fun Halloween costume that year.
I actually have Lincoln's hands.
Do you?
The thumbs were in the wrong position when they cast them. And I think it was Don Iwerks. Don had said they were his hands.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that until just a couple years ago. And but my dad had taken these, brought them home for me. And so I've got them at the house. Yeah.
Well, did you wear them for Halloween, Matt?
I didn't wear them for Halloween. I didn't figure out how to be a funky witch or something like that.
Well, it's not too late.
Well, I have put them out for Halloween. I have done that. Yeah.
That's fun.
But not as a costume.
Have them like reaching out from under a potted plant or something.
Yeah. Just to make sure they just don't get stolen.
We should have brought our hands to the podcast. And
Yes.
There you go. Oh my goodness. I wanted to ask, your mom worked on the original Mouseketeer set. Do you guys know
that's how she got hired.
The original Mouseketeer set.
It was only for like 3 weeks.
I heard a story. Really?
I mean, I was only 3, so I can't swear to that. But yeah, she got hired for the Mouseketeer set because she could use industrial equipment. She had worked on props at her previous employment and learned how to use all these industrial tools. And she was actually certified. So as soon as Walt found that out, or somebody found that out, Walt moved her from working on the Mouseketeer sets over to the model shop because Disneyland was on the verge of opening and he needed help getting it ready. So she got hired in the model shop right away and was working with Fred Jerker and Wathel Rogers initially in the model shop.
Yeah.
And I've always felt it was just amazing what your mom did, along with those gentlemen also. But working on the miniature homes and buildings for Storybook Land.
Yeah, that was one of her first projects.
and even down to the minute little pieces of stained glass.
Oh, we have a story about that.
Well, that was
soldering.
I told you that Walt was notorious for breaking things.
Oh,
So we have a story about the stained glass specifically for Storybook Land. She had been as you said, working on these teeny tiny little actual stained glass pieces, and she had I don't know how many hundreds of pieces of lead that she was going to solder them to in order to actually assemble it and install the window.
And she loved working with lead. It was soft and pliable.
Okay.
Oh, the things that they didn't know back then.
Yes.
But so she had the whole stained glass window laid out with hundreds of pieces of glass and lead, but it hadn't actually been soldered together yet. And Walt came in and wanted to pick it up, and he picked it up, and hundreds of pieces of everything flew everywhere.
Oh no. Oh no. You know, that reminds me of another story your mom told me. That she was in the model shop.
It's going to go for about 3 hours, right?
We could. I mean, but
there's a few stories.
The story that she was working on the headdress for the Evil Queen, and I almost said Ursula, the Evil Queen. This is going way back.
Evil Queen.
And Mark Davis came into the model shop, and this was the night that it was going to be the first date of Mark and Alice. And Mark comes into the model shop, and she had the headdress on a foam head. You remember this story?
No.
And
I just
Mark
imagine
Mark thought he would be cute, and he went over to grab the headdress to put it on. And Harriet said it was almost like in slow motion. No, Mark, no. And he grabbed this headdress, and it had pins in it to keep it on the foam head. And if you remember, Mark was going bald, and he threw this on, and those pins just scratched his forehead. And he had blood running down his face. And Harriet felt so badly. And it was his first date with Alice that night.
Well, they seem to have lasted through that.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did.
All the blood dripping down his face.
Oh, that was another great story your mom had.
Yeah, there were a few model shop stories, both the bloopers and the pranks that they played. There was a lot of pranks as well.
Oh, too funny.
I was gonna say, you got to talk about some of the pranks, because your mom. These are stories that I hear, but I want to hear from you, because I mean, they're secondhand stories, but I'm sure you know better than anybody. What are some of her best pranks from that time?
Well, I don't know which pranks she invented and what the others did, but the last time I remember being able to visit the shop was when the Pirates were being created, and that was still when families could come in and visit, and it was sort of casual, and there were pirates in lewd positions, and some of the females had no tops, and I was 14, so it was quite
risque.
Risque.
And after that, not because of my visit, but because the audio animatronics were becoming patented, then no longer could families come in casually and pick up and drop off and visit.
Yeah, they were pretty protective through the years. Yeah.
Oh my!
The open houses were always fun.
You guys.
Oh yes, no, I actually have another really fun story. I love this, and
you guys were talking about it with Chris Crump last week, but Haley can tell the story for those that didn't hear it.
Yeah, so Rolly was very well known for being sly and a little
prankster,
pranky and a little dirty, a little raunchy. And one day, my grandma and Fred Jurger were hanging out, and Rolly came in, and as Rolly tells it, he says, you get a little tired of drawing Mickey Mouse all the time. So he had a collection of sketches that were erotic drawings. And he came out to show them to Fred and my grandma Harriet. And she was just so tickled. She almost fell over laughing. She loved it so much that and she took the drawings. She stole them from him. I don't know if she stole them with permission or just took them. I don't know. But she opened up her the model shop peep show, and was charging all the guys in the shop a nickel for a look at each erotic drawing, and I think they had a line quite long out the shop. But then she used the nickels, all the nickels collected. She gave them to Rolly because he was trying to buy his kid a bike at the time. So
it was before the Me Too movement.
She assisted with the fundraising of the bicycle with his erotic drawings peep show.
It was a fundraiser.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it was
for a good cause,
for a good cause.
Fundraiser. Yeah, for a good
It was so charitable that way.
Fundraiser.
You know, I also read, and I didn't realize.
About...
Oh, sorry, Vince. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Vince. Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Well,
I didn't realize.
Did your mom ever talk about?
We're delayed here, folks. Sorry about that. There's heavy winds up where Vince is, so everything is delayed. Go ahead, Vince.
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead.
Vince,
go ahead.
Ask us.
No, go ahead.
Did my mom ever talk about what?
The women weren't allowed to do this when she started. The tour that she took with Ken Peterson when she started, and she was told women are not allowed to do this. Did she ever discuss that? Did that ever bother her, or was she going to break the wall?
I can't say I ever heard anything that bothered her.
She wouldn't have talked about
it.
it.
She was very positive about her work atmosphere, and I was a kid, and so if she complained about anything, it was behind closed doors, maybe to my dad. But I don't, people say, oh, well, it was sexist, or it was such sexist times back then. And yes, it was. And obviously she played the part by dressing the very feminine way that she did. But at one point, I remember her saying that Walt came in and asked her, Harriet, what are you making? How much are you making? And she told him, and he said, I'm going to see that gets doubled.
Oh.
And it did. He got her salary doubled. So I feel like she felt very well treated by him, like with the bathroom, he was going to make her a women's bathroom, because that wasn't right, that she had to get the men to hold the door for the men's bathroom. And it seemed like she felt very respected and well treated by him, and they had kind of a camaraderie. He loved miniatures, she loved miniatures. He would provide, like when he went to Europe, he would provide postcards and miniatures that he got in Europe that she would use to design the Matterhorn or whatever project she was working on, the pavilions for the New York World's Fair. So there was few complaints, if any, that I
will
heard.
say, she we recently got access to some audio interviews that we hadn't heard before, which was really exciting. And I was listening to some of them recently, and somebody asked, like, how was it being the only woman, the first female Imagineer? And she says, oh, I didn't think about it at all. I loved the guys and they treated me great, and we were just there to do the work. And part of me kind of wonders if that was a line, but she would never admit to feeling, any kind of way. And I do know that she loved working there, and she did feel respected, especially by her close colleagues that she worked with all the time. I do know that because she was so gorgeous, that she was definitely hit on often, I think, by some of the the workers and things like that. Never the close guys who worked with her every day, because they were all married and they respected her and they had a great relationship. But sometimes somebody from the workshop or an engineer would come through or something like that. I know that she was a very attractive young lady, and so that gave her some attention, and I think she handled it very well. But she says that she never thought about being the only woman, that it didn't, that it didn't necessarily, it wasn't an issue, and it didn't cross her mind often. But I do sometimes just wonder, is she glossing it over? Is she making it just sound great because she would never say a bad word about anybody, or what? So that's just something I've always been curious about.
It was an era.
I'm very supportive of her being the first female and kind of the only female in the shop. She had a very close camaraderie with Fred, and maybe it wasn't well known to the public, but Fred was gay, and he was kind of her second husband, and they had a great relationship. All three of them, they traveled together a couple times out of the country, and she and Fred would buy lavish art for each other when they would go on trips when they weren't together. So she had a great relationship with all the guys in the shop. I heard their names frequently and rarely met them unless I went to pick her up from the shop before they closed the shop down to families. But
she was very feminine and dressed the part, but she was also very strong.
yes.
So and that's that other
That was
side
the
that you didn't know,
duality.
Haley. Right. So and that came out when I'm sure she had to stick up for herself or prove herself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
I
she
know that.
didn't change who she was, being, you know, the well put together
No, she didn't
feminine
change who she was
lady.
at all. And I think that people talk that like she looked just like Leave It to Beaver's mom, you know. But she
Without the apron.
But she came in.
Yes.
Yeah, well,
With the
so there's a
smock.
story about that too, about the apron. But she came in with her heavy equipment license, and she's this tiny little person. She was
Yes.
5'2", size 2 petite. Her waist was
Zero.
about this big
Size
around.
zero.
Size 0.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Yes.
She was 5'2", so 0 petite. And you know, and so it is kind of funny to imagine her like using a table saw, but
yeah, she would talk about the equipment, band saws and table saws and drills and
she was also a master at maneuvering any kind of social situation. She was very adept at morphing, you know, into the person who she needed to be in any given scenario, I think.
Oh, right.
And she was charming, and so she knew how to charm people, and she was also really great at distracting people, you know, if that needed to happen. And so I think socially she had a lot of prowess in those situations. So I think if she ever had to navigate out of a situation, she was well equipped to do so.
Yes.
But really quickly about the apron, because I mentioned it. There's a funny story returning back to her fashion and how she dressed all the time. She tells a story about how she was wearing a navy file suit and she accidentally spilled some kind of chemical on it. And really quick, she tried to get it out, tried to get the stain out, and she poured acetone on her skirt.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so the acetone dissolved her entire skirt.
Oh, no.
She giggles and says, you know, I'm standing there with no clothes on. And Fred Jerger happened to have an extra pair of blue jeans in his bag that he loaned her for the rest of the day. And I'm just imagining her wearing these baggy men's blue jeans, you know, out of character that must have felt. But
and how she got them to stay up.
Right. So after that, she
clothespins or masking tape, no doubt.
Right. After that,
rope.
She then took off her smock that she wore in the shop. Instead of wearing it normally like a smock, she took it off and tied it around the front of her waist like an apron so that she wouldn't spill any chemicals in her lap again.
You told me a story recently about that I hadn't heard, that you heard on the audio, about her throwing acetone at somebody in the middle of the, like, late at night.
Something
who was coming into the shop who was not regular,
not supposed to be there, and I think somebody got a little bit too forward or something. We have no idea who it was. She doesn't mention in the audio, but she accidentally spilled some acetone on somebody who I think got a little too close for comfort and said,
"Wow, well, good for her."
I don't think she offered him an extra pair of blue jeans, so hopefully he just disappeared.
Wow. You know, I think my dad told me this story of Walt bringing a bunch of executives. I believe it was B of A, executives from B of A that were coming through. And so Walt was kind of showing the model shop off. And one of the executives spotted Harriet and said, "Harriet, what are you doing here?" And went over and they hugged and said hello and everything. And Walt's kind of looking, and after they kind of went by, Walt came over and talked to your mom and said, "Harriet, how do you know this gentleman?" And she says, "Oh," and I think she was saying her dad knew him. And I believe that was the story. Maybe it was your dad. Your dad.
Might have been my dad, because her dad was in Texas and wouldn't have known B of A people, most likely.
Okay. So maybe it was your dad then.
Probably.
And Walt didn't realize there was a connection there with B of A executives and your dad.
Did you win them a sponsorship or something?
I'm sure it helped. Thanks, Harriet.
Yeah. Another funny story is the rock candy story.
What? Wait a sec, Vince. You're delayed.
Oh, I feel like we're just jumping
rock candy.
all over
Yeah, no, rock candy.
Rock candy.
Yes.
Oh, he was asking about pranks, and it wasn't a prank, but she would take stuff home that was being discarded, and so they were building Candy Mountain, which preceded the Matterhorn, and Candy Mountain morphed into the Matterhorn, and they had used real candy to build the model of this would-be attraction on a 5-foot model of a mountain. And there was both Swiss hard candies and rock candy, and so she brought home a box of rock candy when the project got ditched by Walt. And I was in the 3rd grade, and I took a box of rock candy to school the next day and handed out rock candy at recess.
You were
and
popular.
I got in trouble for it.
You got in big trouble.
I didn't ask permission, so.
But we do still have a few pieces of that rock candy from the original Candy Mountain model.
Oh,
we
really?
have a Christmas tree every year because they are totally and completely petrified.
Yeah, they're over 50 years old, and they're still in only slightly discolored shape, but they still are quite intact. And my mom hung them from our Christmas tree for years. So
that's fun. Well, they literally are rock candy now.
They are actual rocks now.
We've done the experiment, and sugar does not decompose.
That's great. That's great.
Vince, you were going to start to ask something.
So Blaine Gibson.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was wanting to ask about Blaine Gibson. You called him Pops. How special was he to your family? What did he mean to your mom and you guys?
Well, after my dad passed away and Blaine Gibson's wife, Cora, passed away, and both Blaine and my mom ended up living in Santa Barbara. Blaine moved to a retirement home in Santa Barbara, just a mile or two from where my mom lived. And they struck up a friendship, and then they became sweethearts. And so my kids had never known a grandpa because my dad died when Chelsea, my oldest, was just 1. So he and his son and his wife became dear friends, and he and my mom became sweethearts in the last years of their life. And so we called him Pops, and they called him Grandpops because he was such a dear.
And he really was just like the sweetest, the happiest, most charming man I have ever met. And it was really special to have at least some kind of like a pseudo grandpa relationship with him, and he was just so delightful.
And he didn't have girls, he had only 1 son. So he told them they were like his adopted girls.
So it was very sweet. And I know that even when they worked together, they had a very convivial working relationship, and they kind of tag teamed the way that I describe it. Blaine would do all the sculptures for the animatronic figures, and everybody knows he sculpted Lincoln and all of the Hall of Presidents and many of the pirates and everything. But then my grandma would come in with the figure finishing side and turn them into living, breathing humans rather than a robot with sculptor face.
He would say Harriet brought them to life.
Yes.
So they always had a great friendship, and as they were colleagues, and then well after they were both widowed and they reconnected.
I think that's very sweet.
It was really
nice
sweet.
that the rest of the family was very accepting of everyone, and it was a good family. Yeah,
and we're still in touch with Wes, Blaine's son, and his wife, Mary Jo. We'll see them in Santa Barbara next week.
Oh, good.
Yeah, they're sweethearts. They're like family.
I was going to wait for this to be kind of at the end. I guess we're getting close, but we
have another 2 hours to go.
Oh, that's right. 3 hours.
Right.
I have to tell you a sweet little story. Yes. Got it, Vince. Thank you. But this was very sweet. So I did this a few times. I would go up and pick the 2 of them up and bring them down into Anaheim, Santa Ana, wherever there was a Disney-Ana function. And so I was kind of their chauffeur and friend to watch out for them. But after one of these talks, we ended up all going into the park. And this was shortly after my dad's passing. And I had told them, I said, they were talking about windows on Main Street. And I said, my dad never got one here at Disneyland. He's got one in Florida, but he doesn't have one here at Disneyland. And I said, I was kind of, putting bugs in people's ears that it would be nice if Sam McKim had a window on Main Street. But it was only for the fact that I wanted him to be able to take his grandkids down the street and point out, grandpa's window, right? I thought he'd get a kick out of that. Well, when he passed, I didn't care anymore. I really didn't. But anyway, he did end up with a window 2 years after he passed. But we were talking about windows. And so they said, "Oh, Sam doesn't have a window." And it was so sweet. Both of them said, "I will share my window with Sam."
Aww.
Both of them had said that. And it was so touching to me that they, because they were all dear friends, working at WED.
Yes.
But that was very sweet. So I'm throwing that out since you mentioned both of them.
Wow.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Well, we still visit my mom's window whenever we go to Disneyland. And
you have
go ahead,
to.
Vince.
You have to.
Yeah.
Give a nod and a smile and a kiss.
I was going to ask, Matt, you just found a letter. Do you want to read them that letter? I bet they don't know about that letter to your dad.
Oh,
do you have
there was
that
a little
with
note.
you?
There was a little note. So
that my mom wrote for your dad.
Yeah, there was. We're going through boxes of things still, and
we understand.
Yes,
2 years to go through grandma's house.
Like your mom and grandmother, my dad didn't throw anything away.
Right.
But
depression kids.
I'm sorry?
Depression kids.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
yes.
My dad did a painting for the Lyra Awards, which is a film recognition for people within audio and music and such recordings. And Haley, have you heard of the Lyra Awards?
I actually haven't. No.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, they were honoring back in 1985. They were honoring Bob Hope, and so it was held at. My mom couldn't go with my dad, so Brian and I went with my dad, and it was black tie, so we were in tuxes and everything. Big ordeal. It was at the Toluca Lake Country Club, and so because it was there, it ending up in the newspaper, the Tolucan.
Of course.
And so with your mom being there, well, yeah, she would have still been there. And so anyways, the painting ended up on the front page with my dad being mentioned.
Cool.
And so your mom clipped it.
Of course she did.
Put it in a file and sent it to my dad. And she had a little note here inside the folder.
Note. Yes, a sticky note, naturally.
A sticky note, yep.
That's something this one inherited is the sticky notes.
Oh, okay. And it says, congratulations, Sam, ! You've done it again. Bob Hope has finally got a real prize and signed by you, Harriet.
That's really
sweet. I just came across
like her.
She also clipped newspapers.
Did she?
The time, like obsessively. We would get mail, like a manila envelope with like 10 different newspaper clippings. And sometimes we would wonder, why did she send me this? Because especially as she got older and older, I guess she would read some kind of an article and it would have reminded her of somebody. But sometimes we had to really do the homework and figure out like, what about this particular article made her think of us or me? So she sent me newspaper clippings all the time. That was very,
but that one sounds like it was appropriate.
Obviously, that one was very sweet and lovely, but it was a funny thing that developed and I think continued to kind of grow as she got older, was this newspaper clipping habit.
Yeah, there were a lot of newspaper clippings to throw out after she passed. Yeah. And sometimes it was recipes either that she saved for herself or sent to me. And sometimes because I was a marriage and family therapist in private practice, she would send me articles about women in divorce.
Oh.
And I would be like, why is she sending me this?
But here's the nice thing, you two. She was obviously thinking of you.
Yes, she was. Yeah,
you know?
True.
Yeah.
So,
and she was
not forgotten
like that. And she was so good about sending thank you notes and cards, and she would send thank you notes for thank you notes that somebody else sent her, and she would thank them for their thank you note.
I love that. Oh, what a sweetheart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
in 2000, she was inducted.
Sorry,
she was a, she was a Disney legend. No, and I was just saying in 2000, she was a Disney legend. Was that the pinnacle? Was she so proud of that? Was that something that she talked about?
She was very modest, and I did get invited to that, and I went with her for the Legends ceremony, and that was very exciting, and she did her handprints that are still in the animation courtyard there.
Plaza.
Yeah, the Legends Plaza. So that was very fun for me to be part of. But she was very modest about all of her success and achievements. And I didn't get invited to her retirement party that Disney threw because she told me later she just assumed it would be like punch and cookies and no big deal. Because I guess when she retired, she didn't feel so valued. I think she felt like they wanted new blood. But the retirement ceremony was quite the bash, and she got a beautiful bronze statue of yeah.
There it is. There's the handprints.
There's her handprints.
Although, you say that she didn't invite you to the retirement party because she thought it would just be folding chairs, punch and cookies. But have you seen photos of her in that retirement party?
Yes.
She looks impeccable. She has a beautiful corsage that she's wearing.
But they gave that to her at the event.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Because I was like, oh, she showed up knowing. She looks so good.
She just had one of her pink suits on, and
she looked amazing.
My dad was wearing his usual suit, so yeah.
But no, it's true. She didn't invite the family to much. She was often. We weren't totally aware of, especially towards the last decade or so that she was with us, she was getting invited to D23 and she was signing autographs and doing these panels and interviews. And we didn't know about half of it, and she didn't invite us to it and just underplayed everything.
I heard about it afterwards, and she enjoyed what she called them Disney geeks, that they would line up for miles and they would sign autographs, and she got to know some of them because they would come to all of the events. And so she got to know who their kids were, and she wrote notes that she kept at home about their kids and their, surgeries and whatever. I did get invited to go to the 100th. It was the 100th celebration at Disney World, 100 years.
Well, she took us all to the parks for the first time then,
well,
right?
that was my 50th birthday. But
right.
when there was a 100th celebration of Disney, not Walt Disney. It was Walt Disney's
100th birthday.
It would have been his 100th birthday, and there was a big to-do at Disney World, and I got to go with her to that, and she spoke on a panel, and we got first class on the plane and got put up at the Grand Floridian. Yeah. So that was really fun.
I was really jealous.
Well, you were young. You were young and in school. So.
Yeah, but I knew what the Grand Floridian was.
It was grand. I had a grand time, and there was little souvenirs on the bed. And
I was also super jealous that Mom got to go to the Legends ceremony, and they were treated like royalty, and you had a Sherpa or something.
And now she's one of the Disney geeks. That grandma.
Totally. I've coined the term Disnerd. I'm a 100% Disnerd. I have annual passes. Bought my annual pass before I even had an apartment in LA when we moved to SoCal. But I know that Jodie Benson, the voice of the Little Mermaid, was in the same Legend class of 2000, and you got to meet her, and I did not. So if Jodie Benson is listening, I'm a big fan.
And she does voiceover.
I'm a voice actor, so that's why. If nobody's aware, that's my job. That's what I do. I'm an actor, singer, and a voice actor. So that was a big deal.
Haley, if we get her on, we'll have to have you come and co-host.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't say.
Let me think about it.
That's funny. So we were talking about your mom being your dad's favorite Imagineer. What's her favorite Walt Disney story? What's your favorite Walt Disney story of hers that just means the world to her? Something that was touching to her? Was there anything that she just truly loved? A great story with Walt?
I have one. I've a couple that I know I love to hear and that I know she told animatedly. But one is that they were working on Pirates of the Caribbean, and that was the last project that Walt personally oversaw, even though he didn't see it open. But they had been working on the model, and they built the model up to like a kind of bar table height, almost like chest height. It was big, the big scale model, and he wanted to be able to see it at eye level as the guests would have. And so apparently they pushed him in a wheelie chair through the model that was the ride. And so Walt got to kind of ride Pirates of the Caribbean in a wheelie chair. Now, a friend of mine who's a Disney influencer, and he is sort of like he's a Disney historian of his own, self-appointed. And he said that it was sort of like a rolling machine chair thing or something, but I always pictured like a rolling office, like a desk chair that they were just like wheeling Walt through.
That's how I pictured it also when she told it.
That's what I imagined. So I'm sticking with that story. But so I just love that, the idea that they're in there, that the Imagineers are just like pushing Walt in a wheelie chair through the Pirates of the Caribbean. I love that. And the other one I love is the story of the Robin from Mary Poppins. Because my grandma, in addition to working on all the parks, she did some of the live action props and sets for the films. And so she was tasked with creating the Robin for Spoonful of Sugar that sat on Julie Andrews' finger. And it was a little ring that slipped onto the finger, and the claws of the bird kind of covered the ring mechanism. And then grandma would be in the corner, like twiddling the knobs and pushing the buttons to make it chirp and beak and tail feather and, things like that. And Walt loved coming in with the head of Bank of America, or she says Monsanto or something like that. And any of the execs who were coming in, and he was trying to woo to raise money for a project.
Or to sponsor a pavilion at the World Fair.
Yeah. And so he would put on the Robin and carry on a whole little conversation with it while she twiddled the knobs and made the, wings flap and the tail feathers jiggle and whatever else. And so that Walt could charm all of these executives with this Robin. And so they had sort of like a duet thing that they did together. And I thought that was adorable.
And one of the funny stories, it's kind of a backstory to the Robin, is that he gave my mom a mynah bird, a live mynah bird, to live on her desk so she could study the birds. Kind of like she wanted to study the skeleton for the figure modeling, that she had a live bird that lived on her desk that was the kind of shop pet that they named Joker. And Joker was a pretty smart mynah bird and started imitating the guys in the shop and saying bad words.
Uh-oh.
So when they knew Walt was coming to inspect, they would throw a sheet over the bird so that it wouldn't say, damn it, damn it, damn it, when Walt was there.
And I have heard her say that, like, when Walt would come to the shop, they sort of had they all developed like a chain of telephone, and somebody would give them a code, that Walt is coming. I think she called him Yellow Shoes. Yellow Shoes is coming was the code name because he had a pair of yellow shoes, or maybe it was Mickey's shoes for yellow.
Yeah.
So they dubbed Walt Yellow Shoes. But before they had that sort of telephone chain to give everybody heads up, the boss is on the way. I think Walt would purposefully kind of like shuffle his feet and clear his throat and kind of cough outside the door before walking into the shop to kind of give them an opportunity to clean up their language and stop swearing so much.
Throw the sheet over Joker.
Straighten up their smocks.
Yeah. So I thought that was kind of cute that he sort of like, he knew that they wanted to clean it up for him. So he kind of gave them the heads up himself.
But everybody, and you can probably attest to this too, Matt, they all really admired and respected Walt and really wanted to please him. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely,
there weren't complaints about the boss, except for maybe impossible requests. But whenever he made an impossible request, I think I want this to be a Matterhorn instead of a Candy Mountain. Will do. They just like, okay, we'll get that to happen. And then they would scramble and mutter among themselves, how the hell are we going to do this? Damn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how the bird started getting his bad language.
But that was sort of also why he was such a great, CEO and creative director and leader of them all, is because he would just sort of plant these seeds. He'd be like, well, what if we did this? Could we do that? How might you do that? Why don't you think on that? And then he'd just leave.
Well, like the Tiki Room was originally going to be a restaurant.
Yeah,
and then they realized that the birds would shit on all the food.
Well, they wanted real birds in the restaurant, and they didn't want the birds pooping on everybody's food. So they turned it into a show.
Yes.
Where was I going? I lost my train of thought.
How he told them we want to have live birds,
Well, not specific to the Tiki Room, but just the way he introduced any project was, why don't you think about this? What if we tried that?
What if the birds and the flowers could sing?
Yeah,
you could work on that.
Just leave and then be like, how do we do that? But he gave them full creative license to figure it out and do it how they want it. And then they just showed it to him and got approval or not. Or he would say, oh, I like that. How do we plus it? Or how do, let's keep this part, but maybe we add something else. And then they went off and did their thing and made it better and came back to show him. So he wasn't hovering. He wasn't overly controlling. And I think that's what made, especially those early days, so very creative, is because they were able to sort of pour their own creativity and artistic ingenuity into everything without being micromanaged. And I think that was really brilliant.
He knew the players, he knew their capabilities, but the big thing was he was the maestro. He knew how to orchestrate everything.
Yeah.
But also, if he came up with flops all the time, then the people that were designing all of this stuff would go ahead and make the changes and do something. But because he just had Midas's touch, and he had a pulse on what people wanted to see and experience, he knew the direction it needed to go. So if all of a sudden he says, you know what, this Candy Mountain idea is just not going to work. Let's start working on the Matterhorn. Obviously, everyone respected him and knew he had a finger on the pulse. This is what we need to do. And everyone got behind him. Yeah.
He always had a good reason for everything.
Absolutely.
And they had great teamwork among themselves. So the machine shop and the model shop and the figure finishers would all team tag together and make it come together as a whole.
Yes.
But they also didn't always know what all the other compartmentalized pieces were doing. They were working on their own thing, and then I don't know how this is gonna plug into the puzzle piece, and then it always did. So they just sort of trusted it.
Walt knew.
He was the only one who knew every single piece, though.
Yes.
And but they were geniuses at their piece of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
Well, my mom would sometimes reminisce about how when they first told her, when she got hired to work on the Mickey Mouse Club set, and that they were building a park based on a mouse, and it was in the orange groves of Orange County, she was just scratching her head. And the same with Lincoln. Like, when he said, I want to do an audio animatronic Lincoln that gives the Gettysburg Address, she was like, oh, this is not going to work. Everybody knows what Lincoln looks like and what that Gettysburg Address is supposed to sound like. And she just thought, oh, this is a bad idea. But it was a fantastic success, and somehow they made it work. I think Blaine Gibson deserves a lot of credit for that one.
Oh, beautiful work. My dad also worked on that one. With the artwork that was shown.
Awesome.
Everyone had to pull together to make it happen.
And it was very groundbreaking. The Tiki Birds and Lincoln were very groundbreaking. And so by then, as a teenager, I became proud of these original things that my mom and her team, the Disney Imagineers, were doing. And I had aspirations of becoming an artist until I got to college and realized I couldn't follow in the shadow of my mom, and I became a marriage and family therapist instead.
Well, good for you.
Mom was a very talented fashion designer, budding fashion designer early on, and even won a competition for 17 magazine with some kind of a fashion submission. And they sent her to New York City and put her up in the Waldorf Astoria and gave her a makeover and everything. We still have the magazine that we pulled out of the drawers. So Mom always had a good artistic side, and
That's
my
exciting.
sister also, like, the design element got passed on to my sister as well, who got into the visual arts and the design background, and I went with I'm the crazy
performing arts, which is probably my mom's shadow side that Haley inherited, because my mom got nicknamed Tippy Tap as a child because she was tap dancing in her kitchen after Shirley Temple. She taught herself to tap dance in her kitchen. And so all the relatives refer to my mom as Tippy Tap, and she's still Aunt Tippy to my cousins.
Yeah, and Tap was her maiden name. So
now, also, and I didn't realize this too, because I didn't really get a chance to meet your dad, Pam. But I'm sorry?
I said, me neither.
Yeah, which is such a shame. And they were preparing for retirement and everything. I mean,
yes.
But
at 58.
Yes. But I didn't realize your dad was wanting to come out to Hollywood to be an actor and a screenwriter.
Yep, that's right.
Working with Capitol.
Yes. Well,
records eventually
he
for a brief
wasn't
time.
looking to work at Capitol. He was looking
Right.
to work in the theater arts at the time when Hollywood was in its prime, and
Yes.
Doris Day and Jane Mansfield and all of those were on the screen. But
Yes.
that was not his path. And so for the first 7 years of my childhood, he was auditioning and writing, and he took care of me while my mom was working full time. And that's why she went to work full time, is because he hadn't quite made it in his preferred career. And then he became an administrator and did work at Capitol Records for a little while and Motown for a little while, and ended up working at Northrop Enterprises in his last years of his life.
That's amazing. It's quite a story even for your
they
dad.
both
I mean,
were very creative, and he remodeled our house with
yes.
and they did quite a number on our house. It wasn't recognizable by the time they
We still have some of his old actor headshots.
There is a member in our group.
Oh, wow. Yes, Vince.
There is a member in our group named Linda Miller, and she lives in the house you grew up in now. She was telling me in a message that she lives in the house. Yeah, that there were some things at the park. She bought it from the previous owner.
Don't blow up this poor woman's spot. She's going to have people camped out front.
So
never mind.
She was saying that there were, she was saying there was some things in the home that the last owner said, oh yeah, Harriet left some things in the garage, but my daughters came and got them and they took them with them. So there's nothing really left. She's trying to modernize the house, but she knows that she lives in the house that you lived in, and your mom and your dad. So I thought that was pretty interesting. That's pretty neat.
And this is Toluca Lake. In Toluca Lake?
Yeah, Toluca Lake.
Well, don't give any more away.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you, Linda.
I want to know if they still have the push button toilet.
Yeah, there's no longer a toilet that pushes from the doorbell.
Darn. That could be a selling point.
Ladies, I know I'm on delay, so I wanted to just say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for coming on today. I know it's Mother's Day, and getting to talk to your mom about your mom, it's been such a pleasure for me. Thank you so much, Maddie. I'm going to turn it over to you while I've got the delay, so you can kind of, because we're by our hour and I want to let them have their Mother's Day.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, it's been a pleasure and a delight for us to talk about my mom and Haley's grandma. And she's right here behind us.
She is. She's with us.
She's
this cutout,
always here.
I think she got from some, what, how did we get that?
I don't know what it was made for. We just found it in her basement and we've kept it and used it on our book tour to keep her with us.
The things you find in an Imagineer's basement.
Occasionally it's outside the guest room in the hallway and it scares people when they come out. Now we've got it tucked away behind a little screen so it doesn't scare people.
But yes, thank you so much, Vince and Matt, for having us. This has been a real pleasure. It's always a treat to talk about Grandma. I can go on and on about her for hours. My friends have to cut me off, but they don't. Usually they're very kind and gracious and let me go on.
Well, and you have a few Disney friends.
I have a few Disney friends, so it's always really fun to go to the parks together, and they do indulge me and listen to my stories about her on all the rides we go on. So it's really fun.
Well, you've got
and
good
here's
stories.
the book. If anybody hasn't discovered that we have a book that we wrote about her, it's a tribute book. It's not a book that is a biography. Yeah, you have your copy too.
Excellent.
And it's Walt Disney's First Lady of Imagineering, and I co-wrote it with my partner Don Perry, who's a Disney historian.
And the reason we put the book together, put the book together, was that at Grandma's memorial, so many people came up and started just pouring out these stories of love and adoration and silly stories and sweet stories, and you felt compelled to put them together.
They sent cards and told a little story in a card, so we felt like this should be out there for everybody to enjoy.
It's no longer on Amazon. Some people think that we stopped production. It's not available anymore because we had to pull it from Amazon. So if somebody's trying to sell it on eBay or Amazon for like $100 or $200, don't do it. We have it on our website, imagineharriet.com. But I was going to say, there's one review on Amazon that's like 1 star. When I order a book that's about somebody in Disney history, I want the history. These are just family stories. And I was like, oh, well, you should have researched it before you bought it.
There's a few family stories, and there's quite a few Disney colleague stories. The people that knew her sent tributes as well. So it's about half and half.
It is. There are some wonderful stories about her time working there, as well as from friends and family. So it's kind of a collection that gives you an idea of the whole picture of who she was as a person.
It's a great book.
Thank you.
It really tells you who Harriet was. Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, this has been delightful. Thanks, you guys. Great to chat with you.
Sharing your Mother's Day with us.
Thank you.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day to all the moms who might be listening.
That's right.
Yes.
Love to anybody who no longer has moms or grandmas anymore. All the love to everybody.
Yeah. We find ways to keep our mamas alive.
Absolutely. Memories.
Yes.
Yes.
And especially good ones. Like with Harriet.
All right,
absolutely.
Bye-bye, everybody. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks for having us.